Hi, I'm Lisa O'Brien, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it.
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Thank you for joining. Happy to be here with us. As always, I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh. With me as always, our co-hosts, Chris Bixby and Matt Bingel. How you guys doing?
Doing good.
Doing wonderful. Hello, everybody. How are you, Jakey?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking. What do we have for today?
Glad you're with us, folks. Today's guest is a writer and creative director. She was a creative director for the Playhouse Disney brand and the block of the same name. She was also the executive producer of children's entertainment at the Jim Henson Company and also worked on Sprout for many years. Nowadays, she's a freelance creative consultant for How You Doing Productions. Please welcome Lisa O'Brien. Lisa, welcome. Happy to have you here.
Oh, thanks so much. Happy to be here. It's really nice to meet you guys.
You too.
Likewise.
Too.
Nice to meet you too. We're delighted. So to kick this off, even though I kind of introduced you a little bit, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, yeah. I am Canadian, so I graduated from a broadcast school in Canada, and I was, I guess, 19 when I graduated, and I thought I was going to be a teacher. I love teaching. I enjoyed it. I come from a family of teachers. My mom was a preschool teacher, and my aunt was a teacher. So come from a lot of teachers in my family. But then you say like you have really good teachers in your class. You have really good teachers that teach you. And I was doing a class called communications in my last year of high school. And it was all about like how to really make commercials, like make little kind of short. And I had never been exposed to anything like that. I mean, it was a long time ago in a very small town, and I just thought it was such a cool thing. I always dreamt of how I thought how cool the job Darren had on Bewitched, making commercials. I thought it was such a cool thing. So then I realized, wow, maybe I could combine teaching with media and broadcasting somehow. And so I went to school and I got a broadcast arts diploma. And when they ask, you have to write up like, what is it that you're going to pursue? I mean, most of the people that I worked with were like, oh, I'm going to be a journalist, or well, I'm going to work, in sports, or, very traditional, great career choices, but very traditional. And I was like, I'm going to make kids programming. And everyone was like, what? Because at the time in Canada, in that town, kids TV really wasn't a thing. They were like, oh, you mean like, Mr. Rogers? We also had a wonderful host of a kids show called Fred Penner. And so it was limited. It was very limited. And so I was like, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So in my 20s, first I worked at a place called YTV, which was like a Nickelodeon. And I did these things called day parts, which were the segments in between the shows, and with live VJs, video jocks. And that was a lot of fun. That was a great kickoff. And then I kind of, expanded my career from there. I decided I was just going to travel and learn everything that I could learn. So I went to all kinds of different places in Canada. I went to Nova Scotia and I did a science series called Wonder Why. I went to Calgary and I did a game show series called Kid Street. And wherever the work took me, I went. I had a suitcase and traveled. And then I finally landed in Toronto, and for good, like kind of, I thought for good. And I was accepted into an internship. It's called the Owl Center for Children's Film and Television. And they did an internship where they paid you to learn how to be an independent producer of kids TV. And I was very lucky. I got chosen one of 4 producers across Canada. And one of the key things that we had to do in that internship is after a year you had to produce something. You had to raise money and produce a project. It didn't have to be done, but you had to at least be on the road to it being done. And I did a self-esteem body image video for girls with one of the other interns. Her name's Bernice Vanderland. In fact, I think you might have interviewed her husband, Tim Burns. And Bernice and I hit it off really well. So we joined forces and we produced a called Take Another Look, kind of a twisted Alice through the looking glass of a young girl who thinks that she's nothing special and really berates herself and falls through a mirror into another land where she learns that she's being, bombarded with images that tell her she's not enough. And she, through the journey, learns that she's and as in the Barbie movie, she's enough. She's like absolutely like great the way she is. And it was a nice little show. And we actually cast someone who's very popular, very successful now and was then, Sarah Polley, who went on to become a fantastic director, and she was cast in it when she was younger, and it was a great experience. And then I needed a composer, and somebody suggested this wonderful composer named John McCarthy, and I hired him, and we fell in love, and he had won a green card in the lottery, and he's like, let's move to LA. So we got married and we moved to LA, and that was 26 years ago. And since then I've worked at I was a creative director at Disney Channel. I worked at the Jim Henson Company, which was a wonderful experience. I helped launch Sprout, and created all the co-created with an amazing team, but wrote and created the Goodnight Show, and worked there for, I think it was 10 years, and then it merged with Comcast. It became NBC Universal Kids. So I was the VP of original content there for a couple of years in current and development. And then the latest job that I did was with Cartoon Network and Warner Brothers. I was a creative consultant for 2 years to help them launch Cartoonito, which was a preschool block they were going to launch. And then a merger happened there where Discovery bought Warner Brothers, and that sort of went away, which is sad because it was actually it was a fun concept. And that's kind of it. And then the last year I've been just freelancing for a whole bunch of different companies as a creative consultant. So love working in kids. Think it's a wonderful career choice for anyone interested. And I'm now working on this really exciting project through a company in Vancouver called Future Chicken Today Show. And it's been created, it's a universe that's been created to address the the climate change and eco anxiety that young people feel.
Mhm.
And it comes at you from the year 2050 from an animated chicken
Oh,
who
neat.
interviews all kinds of
Hmm.
cool people. And the idea is that there's like, it's sort of very celebratory and full of hope because it's coming at you from the future, saying because of everything that kids did, all the planet protectors out there, everything that they did today in this year, this decade, has helped to make an incredibly rich and promising future. So that's a wonderful project.
Absolutely.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah.
Wonderful indeed. So, what was your background like, and how did you grow up?
I grew up as an army brat. So I was born in the East Coast of Canada, and then my father got a posting. That's sort of when you're in the army and you have to go somewhere, to Germany. So I lived my first, I'd say, 6 years in Germany. And we lived in a very small. My parents were quite young when they married, and we lived in a pretty small town in a small area. We didn't have TV. Ironically, we didn't have any. We didn't have a TV. We didn't really have a whole lot, except I had a lot of friends. I was really young, but I actually spoke German at the time, which is kind of crazy because I'm sure it's stored there somewhere. But I had a lot of friends, and I used to spend hours and hours and hours and hours um, writing stories and pretending I was a teacher. So it's sort of funny. I really believe that people, what they do naturally as a child, a lot of times is what their destiny might be as a grown up. So I feel like I'm living my childhood dream job.
Definitely.
Yes. So, speaking of Canada, one of your earliest children's projects, as you mentioned earlier, was creating, writing, and producing the CTV series Wonder Why.
Yes.
How did that show kind of come about?
Um, yeah, that's a great question. I think that they contacted me. I had heard that, again, there weren't that many people at the time making shows in Canada. And there was a meteorologist at the very small station called ATV, Atlantic Television, in Halifax, Nova Scotia. and he had an idea that he wanted to do a kids science show. And so I somehow got tracked down and offered the job. And so I moved to Halifax, Nova Scotia, which, by the way, is a beautiful part of the world. If you've never been to Nova Scotia, the far east coast of Canada, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Never been, but I've seen pictures of it. It's beautiful.
It's
Oh,
so
yeah.
beautiful. It's, in fact, I just saw a listing of like, it was like, I think the top 10 amazing places in the world, and the only place that in Canada that made it was Nova Scotia. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Oh,
But yeah,
wow.
it's a really wonderful part of the world. So so I moved there, and I did the job, and it was one of the biggest learning curves I had, because I'd never really written and produced a show before, like a full show. So I still remember having this, like, I thought, okay, I'm going to start with, cue cards, like little cue cards, and lay out, like, on this huge wall that wrapped around in a small office that I had, and just write, 1 to 13, and start coming up with, concepts for shows. And then what was wonderful back then is that there were still sponsorships available. I don't know if that's as, as prominent now as it was then, but Air Canada, which flies anywhere in North America, sponsored the show. And what that meant is that we could fly anywhere in North America to shoot. So I kind of started there, where I looked at all the places in North America that I thought would be really cool to go to, like Florida, to go to the space camp in Florida. And just like where are some of the best places. San Francisco has an amazing called the Exploratorium, amazing science center that blows everybody's mind. So I'm like, okay, we'll do one there, and so I sort of backed into the episodes based on where we'd be able to fly. And then I would go ahead of the crew, and I would fly to wherever it was. And funnily enough, there was a place I had never been to the desert before, Palm Springs. I'd been to Arizona, but I'd never been to that desert. And there was a wonderful wild animal park in Palm Springs. And the thing that's so cool about it is it's a lot of desert animals, and they're not captive in cages or anything like that. It's just a really cool place. And so I wanted to shoot there, and I fell completely in love with the desert, and now have a place out there, which is so funny, because I thought one day I would love to have a house in this desert. So anyway, I would go to these places, and I would just literally, like, just walk around, study, think about, like, what would kids find interesting about this, and what would be a really good topic. The example I just gave you, the topic was the desert, which made total sense in the science world of, like, the desert and how does it work, how does life sustain itself, and in those kinds of conditions. And then obviously the one in Florida, like, was an episode about space. So I would spend the day researching. I'd go back to my hotel, I'd write an episode based on that topic, and then I'd fly back home again, and then I would work with the crew to set up the shoot. I wouldn't go on the actual shoot, though, but the crew would then head off with the host, Richard. I think his name is Richard Zarowski, and they would head off to these locations and actually, like, cover the story based on the script. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun. And then it went on to sell to CTV, which is the Canadian broadcasting, like a bigger. It was, it started small, and then it kind of grew. And I think I left after the first season, because I went back I believe I went then to Vancouver for another project, but I passed the reins on to a wonderful writer who still lives in Halifax, Nova Scotia, named Jeff Rosen. So yeah, it was a great experience.
Nice, nice. So, throughout the years, we talked about how you worked a lot in the on-air promotions department for various networks, and one of the first that you did was, of course, YTV. How did you kind of first start working in on-air promotions?
That's a great question, because again, as I was saying, like, when I graduated, it was like, how am I going to work in kids TV when I don't have any experience, and there really isn't a lot of opportunities, and I had to pay my bills. And I was pretty young. I was, like, I guess 20. And so there was a job that was available in Red Deer, Alberta. I graduated in Calgary, Alberta, and there was a job available in Red Deer, Alberta, at a tiny little television station, very small television. And I don't know if you guys know, it might be way before your time, but there was a pretty famous singer, still around, Katie Lang. She's from that small town in Red Deer. So it's just a tiny little cowboy town. And I just thought, and it was about an hour from Calgary. And I just thought, you know what? This is an opportunity. I'm going to take it and see where it leads, which is, I do a lot of mentoring now. And I always tell young people that you might not think that you're going on the path that you have in your imagination right away, but it's incredible how life works. And when you stick with it, how, it sort of goes in circles and ends up exactly where you want to be. So I was working at this television station writing, it was a promotions job. And so I was writing promos for shows, and I was also writing commercials, local commercials, and going out and shooting for like everything from carpets to car sales, car places, auto sales places, to, because it was a farming community, I would write commercials for cows and farms, and I didn't know anything about it, so I had a very quick learning curve. But I only did that job for 3 months when a job that was similar came up in Calgary at a bigger television station. And because I had done that job, even though I'd only been there for a few months, I got the bigger job in Calgary. And then I moved back to Calgary, took that job, and even though it still didn't have a kids division and it was a promo job, the station had a news division that was pretty robust. And so they agreed that I could write and produce a kids news show that would on my own time. I would come in on the weekends, and they gave me a small budget to build a set, and it was called Scoop. And I wrote and produced a kids news show using a lot of footage from, obviously kid-friendly footage of like fun things that were happening around the world. And I had 2 little young hosts, and the show was a success. I mean, these kids end up becoming kind of the faces of a lot of different openings of, like, when the Ice Capades came to Calgary, the 2 of them went on and introduced the Ice Capades. Or in Calgary, they have a Calgary Stampede every year. So the kids were really part of the Calgary Stampede. They became kind of mini celebrities. So yeah, that's kind of the story. And then that gave me at least something that I could show people that you know, that I really, want to make kids content, and here's a sample of something I could do. So that kind of set me on my way.
So now you also worked in on-air promotions at Fox Family Channel. Can you talk about a bit about your work with them?
Yeah. So again, just going back to, the advice that I give people is just to, take opportunities, and because you never know where they go. When I moved to Los Angeles, I had already had quite a bit of experience producing kids programming, and also working at YTV, and I had quite a lot of experience. But when I moved to the States, nobody really knew who I was. I didn't have an agent. I didn't know anybody. I was starting all over again. My husband's a composer, so this is why he really wanted to live in Los Angeles. And so I was really having a hard time kind of finding work as a kids producer, because that was sort of, again, the jobs were few and far between. But then I read that Disney Channel was looking for a writer producer for promos. And that was kind of dreamy, because I always wanted to work for Disney. And so I got that job. And even though it was a little bit of a sidestep, because I had already moved on from promotions to content, which is where I wanted to be, and still in the kids world, I just thought, well, you know what, I'm going to give this a try and see how it goes. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me, because I worked there for, I guess, a year and a half. And then I got called by Fox Family, and they needed a creative director for their kids block, and asked me if still in promo, but it was a step up from being a writer producer. I was going to be a creative director. And so I took the opportunity, and I went over there, and I worked there for about a year. And it was great. It was a fun channel that had a preschool block, and I focused primarily on the preschool block, which I really enjoyed. And I had a small team of people. And then the great thing about that is that there was a creative director position that opened back at Disney Channel about a year and a half after I started at Fox Family. And so I got a call saying, do you want to come back and be a creative director? And I was like, absolutely. So that was an amazing opportunity. I went over to Disney Channel as a creative director, and I was there. I was in charge of everything that wasn't a show. So everything in between. Disney Channel doesn't have commercials per se. Everything they do in between their shows is to promote other parts of Disney and promote the shows.
Right.
So I was responsible for
Mhm.
all of that, the packaging, the promos, the look and style under great guidance. I had a couple of fantastic bosses. One, Andrea Taylor, was one of the best. And we were charged with lifting the channel, from a creative standpoint, from a visual standpoint, when they moved the channel from being kind of a Mickey Mouse type, it really felt like it was sort of a Mickey Mouse type channel. It wasn't really super popular at the time. It was fine. It did fine. It just had a lot of programming that was kind of disparate, and it didn't really. So Rich Ross was at the head of Rich Ross and Gary Marsh were the heads of Disney Channel at that time, and so they did an amazing job bringing in programming like I think the first one was I think it was Lizzie McGuire was the first
Oh yeah.
one. And so there was, Lizzie McGuire, and then it just kind of grew from there. Even Stevens, which was a really fun show. And they just started making these shows for Hannah Montana, um, Sweet Life of Zach and Cody, I think it was called.
Yeah.
And so they started bringing in all these shows and creating all these shows, and we got the chance to create some very cool packaging using the stars of those shows. So we came up with this one concept. Andrea really helmed it, but came up with this concept, which is Disney, Disney Channel stars are just like you. And so we interviewed them about,
Yeah.
do you have to do your homework, and
I remember that. Yeah.
you have to make your bed, and do you get an allowance? And so that was really fun. And I think it really connected our stars to kids, like everyday kids. And so we kind of grew from there. We did a lot of short form interstitials that I think really helped to lift the channel and give it a sense of I don't know, coolness, I guess, at a time when it felt like it was very like I said, young and Mickey Mouse, and fine thing to watch if you were at Disneyland or Disney World on the turn it on. But it didn't have the sophistication that it ended up having. And so that was an amazing, exciting time because we saw the ratings just like go through the roof. And then they decided that they wanted to make Playhouse Disney a full-time preschool channel. It eventually became Disney Junior. And so as a creative director, I got a chance to really work on that block as well, and create a host. And we did a little lump of clay that transformed into different things.
Yes.
Clay,
Clay,
yes.
Clay and Paige,
Yes.
best
Oh
friend
yeah.
with paper. So we created that, and then really and really came up with some fun interstitials, Manners with Max, and a bunch of other fun stuff
Oh,
to
I remember
kind
Manners
of
with Max. Yeah.
Manners with
Yes.
Max. And that was an absolute blast. And again, it was all under the guidance. I had an amazing boss at the time who's still a very good friend. Andrea Taylor, and she really gave me like a lot. She was there for me, but she also let me kind of, grow and do what I wanted to do. And if I was coloring outside the lines, or if she had any, she'd pull me back in, but for the most part, she gave me so much freedom and she taught me so much. So yeah, so then I did that. I guess I did that job for about 7 years, and it was amazing. I mean, Disney, you learn so much working at Disney.
Oh yeah. And speaking of Clay, we previously interviewed Debbie Derryberry, who's the voice of Clay.
Love Debbie. Debbie's an incredible talent. She's an amazing talent. Yeah, we were really lucky to get her. I was always a big fan of Jimmy Neutron, and we wanted a voice. The thing about Disney that can be restricting sometimes is that they didn't want to have they wanted a character, but they didn't want it to be a male or female, and they didn't want to show any ethnicity, but kind of all ethnicities, if that makes sense. Like they wanted a character that embraced that everybody could relate to, all kids could relate to, all parents could relate to. And so it was a real challenge to go, what can that be? And someone came in and pitched a much bigger concept, but in that concept, there was a little lump of clay called Lumpy, and it was just it was kind of like almost looked like Play-Doh. And the idea was that it was a grumpy lump of clay. And so you'd always say, like, don't be lumpy, come on lumpy, don't be grumpy. And it was a cute concept, but it was limited. And so we just took that part of the pitch and worked with and worked with the woman who pitched the larger idea, and really develop clay. And the gift that we had with that is that we had a wonderful producer, Andy Copley, who went on to do she did Pee-wee's Playhouse. I mean, her resume reads like it was incredible. She was an incredible producer. And so she was a producer for this series, and she brought the project to the Kyoto brothers, who are three brothers from Jersey who do stop motion animation.
Oh
And
yeah.
they're amazing. They just did a movie called Marcel the Shell, that is one of my favorite movies. And they did a lot of like B movie kind of like monster movies back in the day. And I thought, are they going to be interested? I mean, they're such hip, cool, like, and they're doing stuff that's like irreverent and and really out there, and they embraced it full on, and they brought this character to life. And it wasn't an easy thing, because you had to take this like lump, literally a ball of clay with Google eyes, and then transform it into all the characters for the shows that were upcoming. So transforming it into Bear. I think there was one that was where he transformed into Bear in the Big Blue House, but Roly Poly, like all these different characters maintain the same essence of the original clay, and they did a brilliant job with it. So that was fun.
Yeah, and so interesting question. So you mentioned Manners with Max, and because I know the voice who was on Manners with Max also did the voiceover for PBS Kids Go. Do you know at
Yes.
all who the voice of that
Oh, these
was?
guys are really good. He was also Nickelodeon. He did some stuff for Nickelodeon. Absolutely. An amazing artist and creator named Scott Lipe, who is now a creative director and, I think at a production company, but his name is Scott Lipe. And Scott, I was looking for ideas for interstitials, because when you create a brand, you have to be able to find something unique, find something different, make a promise to your audience. The brands are not as big anymore with streaming services, but I still
Yeah.
believe in them. But they're certainly big in products. And so, when you think of like Apple or whatever, what you're getting. Like, good brands, and what to expect from good brands. So the thing with Playhouse Disney is that it was getting kind of buried. There really wasn't a point of view. It was just they didn't really have a leadership then. And then a woman named Nancy Cantor came in as head of programming, and then I worked very closely with her and another amazing woman named Sandy Wax, who went on to run Sprout. And she was the head of research. And so what we needed to do is we needed to find a tagline, a host, and then interstitials that would kind of lift the brand while Nancy was making shows to kind of match what the brand promises were, because it takes a while to make a show. And so we came up with collectively, there was a huge team that came up with the idea of matching your imagination with learning. So it was learning powered by imagination was the line. And so in order to pay that off, I mean, definitely we could pay off the imagination. Everybody knows that about Disney. But the learning element, we had to come up with interstitials, something that could be very quickly produced so that we could put them on the air and people could see what we were trying to achieve with the entire block. So I really wanted to do something on manners. I think it's such an important life lesson for young kids. And I think, most parents are great at teaching their kids manners, but it's always hard for parents to be the lone person teaching something, because, kids are rebellious even at a young age. And so I thought it would be really great to do something funny with manners. And right out of the blue, I got this email from Scott. I didn't know him at the time, but I got an random email from this artist named Scott Lipe, and he had done this little character that was like, I think it was really him, his alter ego. And he was basically like, hi, I'm Scott, and I like to make things that make the television smile. and I want to make
Nice.
something to make your television smile. Like, it was just so simple and sweet and so pure. And he did the animation himself, and it was very,
Oh wow.
as you could see with Max, it was very simple animation. And I fell completely in love with this little piece. And so I brought him in and I met him, and Andrea knew him from working with him at Cartoon Network in the days of Cartoon. She'd worked at Turner Broadcasting, and
Mm.
anyway, she got to know him then in Atlanta. So I got a chance to get to know him, and he's still one of my favorite humans. I have so much of his art in my house. He's an incredible artist,
Oh,
and
nice.
yes, he's remarkable.
Oh.
And so he came in, and I said, "What about why don't we do a series?" And we were like, "Okay, what will we call it?" And we came up with Manners with Max, and the idea was just stream of consciousness. So this kid Max was just like riffing on like, today I went to the park and I really wanted to go on the slide because it's my favorite thing. And so I
Right.
went
Yeah.
to the line and I
They're
wasn't
like,
supposed to.
yeah.
And it was just like really like all the things that kids want to do. Like, I want to eat that extra piece of cake when no one's watching. And I don't want to think about the person behind me when I'm going through a door. I just want to shut the door and, just all these fun things. And Max was like kind of, played the role of almost every kid, I think. And a very funny last story about that is that um, I don't usually get to hear, other than focus testing, I don't usually get to hear feedback on the shows we make unless a friend's kids watched the show or something like that. It's just really hard. It's not like you're doing something and the kids are there, like teaching, where you get immediate feedback. And so, or even writing a book where you can read it to them and see right away. So it's kind of hard unless you're watching a show with a young child. But I was at a grocery store once Max launched, and I really wanted it to have an ending that felt like something kids could repeat. And so we came up with the line, manners matter because manners show you care. And so I'm at this grocery store, and I've got a big cart of stuff, and a dad and his, I'd say 4 or 5 year old, was behind me, and she had one treat, and so she went ahead of me and put the treat down on the conveyor, like, let me just get this, before you. And he goes, and he said, "What would Max say?" And she recited it like perfectly. Like, she wasn't very happy about it, but she took her whatever the treat was off of the conveyor belt. And she was like, "Manners matter, good manners show you care." And she went back, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool!" Like, it works.
Ah,
Mm.
that's great.
So
Yeah.
I couldn't wait to tell Scott Light that. I was like, I called him up right away, and I was
Oh,
like,
that's
"Oh my gosh,
wonderful.
it worked." So yeah.
That's wonderful. There are a lot of good short series on a Playhouse Disney that I remember, like Mickey's Letter Time,
Yep.
Shanna's Show.
Shannon
Yep.
Show, yep.
There are a lot of good
All of
ones.
those were
Yeah.
during my time, and Shanna Show went on to become a series, actually, based on the interstitial. So that was the other good thing about doing short form. I still am a big believer in short form.
Yeah.
Even though times have changed, and now a lot of times shows are just shorts. But back then, a show would traditionally be, for a preschooler, it traditionally was like 7 minutes, um, 7 to 11 minutes. And so to do these little, 1 minute, 30 second or 2 minute bits, really gave us an opportunity. And Sandy had led the research team to go out and test the shorts with kids and with parents to see, is the brand working, is it paying off the promise that we made. And then the other side of it was like, if you really like this show, then maybe this short, then we'll consider making a show from it. And Shanna was one of them, that Nancy Cantor's team went on to make a show from the short. And that's always exciting. Also, the other thing, we did a short for the older kids called Mike's Super Short Show that became super popular.
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Wonderful short. Yeah, I remember that.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, it was a lot of
Yeah.
fun.
Uh-huh.
It was a very clever way of selling product, but not selling product. We had to come up with a concept that would promote new DVDs, Disney DVDs, without
Hmm.
it being a commercial. It
Yeah.
had to feel like it was a show. So Mike's Super Short Show became like, well, you guys know, you've seen it, but Mike was someone who just loved, and his little sister would always come in and bug him. But he loved everything Disney, and so he was always talking about the latest Disney release. And so that became very, very popular, and I think went on to be, I think once I left, actually, it was after I left that it became I want to say either a movie or something bigger, much bigger. But it was very popular in its day.
Yeah, and Allison Stoner, who was on that show, she went on to do wonderful things too.
Allison Stoner is such a talent. I actually ended up working with her. I went to New York with her to work on a segment with Isaac Mizrahi. We were doing a back in the day when the DVDs would come out of the vault and there would be extra little pieces at the end that would be added bonus. And so it was one of the princess movies, and they I think it might have even been Cinderella, and they asked me to help come up with creative ideas for the DVD, and I came up with the idea of how to make a how to become a princess, I think. And so Isaac Mizrahi agreed to help us make Allison Stoner, who's very, very like tomboyish at the time. How do you make her a cool princess? Like not a frilly, just a really like, cool looking princess. And so yeah, so we did that together, and it was an amazing experience. And she's a, she's such a talent. Not only is she a great actress, but she's also an incredible dancer, which you guys probably know,
Hmm.
um, and has been in many big videos.
Oh yes, definitely.
Allison Stoner, yeah. I have
Yeah.
pictures of her when she was younger.
Uh,
She's awesome, awesome human. Haven't
yeah.
seen her for a long time, but awesome human.
So now, after leaving Disney, you were then brought on to help launch another kids network, PBS Kids Brow. How was that kind of created?
A dream come true. So how that happened is that when I was working on the Playhouse Disney rebrand, um one of the heads of the Disney network wanted to make sure that what we were creating it was the same, like would sync up with what was happening overseas in the UK. And which makes sense because her name was Anne Sweeney, so she was an amazing leader at the time, and it makes complete sense because if you look at Coca-Cola worldwide, you're always going to see the same can and the same, for the most part, unless, obviously they have different types of Coke now, but Coke when you see it, McDonald's when you see it. And she was like, I want Disney, this, whatever it's going to be. It wasn't even named Disney Junior then, but I want this Playhouse Disney channel when it launches to feel the same worldwide. And so this wonderful guy, his name's Andrew Beecham, was the head of Playhouse Disney. He had this fantastic formula that he used where he built an actual playhouse, physical playhouse, and he would go each year to a different country, and hosts from all over Europe would come and shoot segments, tosses to shows, promos inside that playhouse. So there was a consistency in Europe. And so Anne had him come to the US for 3 months with his family to work with us to figure out like what can we do together that makes it feel like it's coming from the same brand. And so I got to know him very, very quickly, and we really worked well together because in the UK sensibility of especially preschool and Canada's is very much the same. And
Hmm.
so we just spoke the same language, and we really hit it off, and and became friends. And when I left Disney, he left Disney coincidentally around the same time. He reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've been asked to head up this new channel that's going to be a combination of different content, nostalgic content, from Hit Entertainment, from PBS Kids, and from Sesame Workshop, and we want you to. I feel like I'm missing some Hit, PBS. I think that's it. Anyway, so they're just going to air all of these shows, but I want to do more than that. I want to really give it a style and an essence, and eventually produce our own original programming. Will you come and help me do that? And I was like, sure. So it was funny. The very first thing I did create was the Good Night Show. He said, I want to start with a nighttime block. And on a piece of napkin, while we were having lunch, he wrote out what the shows were going to be, that in that night block, that he thought, oh, these are the shows. And then he just gave it to me on a napkin and said, can you just write something that will work for these shows at nighttime? And I was like, sure. So that's how it all started. And then it just kind of grew from there. And about a year after that, or maybe even less than a year, they didn't have a president. Like, they didn't have someone heading it up. Andrew was head of creative. Andrew really did a lot of the creative, but they still needed somebody to like lead the whole initiative. And funnily enough, they reached out to Sandy Wax, who then was my friend after working with her at Disney. And she had moved on to another channel from Disney, and was heading up the programming and scheduling. And so she got interviewed, and then she called me up and she said, or no, actually we went out for dinner, and she said, you're never going to believe this, but I think I have a good chance of getting the job in Philadelphia, because it was Comcast. So I'm going to move to Philadelphia she was living at the time in California. I think I'm going to get this job. And I said, let's do a pinky swear, because I never want our friendship to get in the way of working together. And, you can, if you have to fire me, you have to fire me. We'll still be friends, kind of thing. And so we did a little pinky swear, and we ended up working together for, I guess, 9 years. And she was an amazing leader. So she and Andrew really were the architects of Sprout. And it was just a couple of us in the beginning. And then bit by bit it grew. I think it was about 60 people in Philadelphia, including on-air hosts. And it was just a magical time. It was an incredible channel. The key thing for us is that we wanted it to feel anti-Disney. And I don't mean that as an insult to Disney. Disney does Disney very well, but we wanted it to feel like it was very real and very raw. We'd always say, Meredith Halpern Ransner became the creative director at Sprout. And we had a saying that we embrace cardboard. So we tried with everything that we did at Sprout to make it feel handmade and homemade. And we wanted to, as Andrew would say, when we would do yoga segments with kids, he'd go, if they scratch their bums, it's okay, because that's what kids do. So we never wanted it to feel overly polished or overly perfect.
Right.
We wanted to show real kids, real parents. And when we did crafts, they weren't perfect. It was a really wonderful time. And I think it's sad that it went away. That was a merger that happened between Comcast and NBC Universal. And when that happened, NBC Universal had different ideas for the channel. It's kind of like beachfront property, a channel, like it's like having beachfront property. And they wanted something that was more of a castle than a cottage. And so we then transformed Sprout into Universal Kids. And that was around for a couple of years, but it was at that point, linear television was kind of going the way of the dinosaur. And so it was really hard for us to sustain an original channel when there was so much competition in that space. But I
Right.
still hear people say to me, oh my gosh, Sprout, oh, I love Sprout, or, my kids love Sprout or whatever. So it was a good
Yeah.
time.
Oh yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely. What a wonderful shows on there too. But during your Sprout days, as you kind of touched up on, you produced for a number of their blocks. Do you kind of dive into more of some of the other blocks you worked on?
Sure, yeah. So the Good Night Show was the first one that we did. And then I'm not sure if I'm getting the order right, because it all happened pretty quickly, but they wanted a morning live block. And so it was really Andrew who led the charge on. Andrew has an incredible uh, um, ability to think like to think like a preschooler. And I think, that's a compliment. Simplistic. So he came up with the idea of setting a morning show in a barn. And I think he actually did come up with the title Sunny Side Up, which was a really fun title because it kind of had lots of different meanings. And what the team did, we had a pretty robust team for that. And what was incredible about that team is that it was live. And it was live every morning, and it was a tiny, tiny closet-sized space, even though it looked a lot bigger on air. But it was a really small studio, and we would have teams of puppeteers and that would rotate. And that's why Chica didn't have a voice, because we wanted different puppeteers to be able to voice her. And so what would happen is that there were rotating teams that would go in, and they'd be on air one week, and then the next week they would prep for their next week, and then the other team would come in and be on air. So there was always like that feeling of like because if you tried to do a live show every day with the same team, they would burn out, and they wouldn't have time to prep for the next show. So this was a really wonderful way. And what we did, which I think was really ingenious, and again, I can't really take credit for it because it was Andrew and the team that worked there, that came up with all the ways that we could kids could go online with their parents, and they could dress Chica with like little color form, kind of move and stick. And then when we come back from the break, we would have downloaded those images, and there was an actual physical closet on the set, and Chica would be there. And so we would match, what somebody would suggest. So Jake, if,
Right, yeah.
5-year-old Jake that decides that you want Chica to have like a tutu and a fire hat on, then all of a sudden you're watching the show in real time. You've just submitted that, and you're watching the show in real time, and it's like, hey, Jake wants like, this is what we printed out, this is how he sees Chica. What do you think? And Chica would be like, and so Kelly or whoever was hosting would open up the closet, take out that exact outfit, and dress Chica in what, in this case, Jake would suggest. And that is mind-blowing for a kid, because it's like erasing, it goes beyond wishing a happy birthday and it's your name on your birthday. I mean, we did that as well. We did birthday cards and shout outs, but that's kind of like magic for a child, because it's like, I just created something and now I'm seeing it back on air. Like, they would know on air, but they would say, these are my characters actually doing the thing that I just submitted. So I think that was really ahead of its time for preschoolers. It sort of erased the boundary between, like, I'm in this box and you're out there. And so that's what I thought Sunny Side Up did incredibly well. Plus the hosts were all incredibly talented. I mean, Carly, I mean, I'm gonna miss some names because there were so many of them that were so incredibly talented through the years, but um, Kelly and Carly, and just really genuinely talented and really cared about kids. Just like Michelle and Stacia in the Good Night Show. I mean, Michelle Lepe could not be more genuine of a human being, and it just shows.
Yeah, and we've had
Absolutely.
two of the other Sunny Side Up hosts in the past, Kelly, which you mentioned, and Caitlin Becker.
Oh, Caitlin's incredible too. Caitlin's gone on to do a really fun work with Moonbug Coco Melon. Yeah, no, they're really talented people. And Carly has gone on to have an amazing career in kids. I mean, she's done so many great things, and I would love to work with any of them again. I mean, they're really great people. And then the other blocks that we did something called the Sharing Show, and that idea
Yep.
came from, I think,
Mhm.
Meredith came up with that idea. And the Sharing Show was really because we we wanted to showcase kids doing cool things. When we did the launch campaign, we didn't have a lot of money for Sprout. So what I did is I invited my friends that all had preschoolers to come in my backyard here. I have a fairly big backyard. And I would say, tell them to bring something they love to do, whether it's blow bubbles, draw something with chalk, feed their lovey, with a little bottle, like, or listen to the with a stethoscope to their heart, whatever they really like to do, because kids at that age are growing and learning so fast, and they love to share what they learn. And so that's what the launch campaign was really about, was just showing kids in their element. And so we were like, oh, how cool would it be if we could share more of that? Like, parents could send in their kids doing really simple but cool things, because the whole brand of Sprout was following the day of a preschooler, and we really wanted it to be authentic to what preschoolers were going through. And it was fairly young, the programming, like more for 2 to 4 year olds. There was some upper preschool, but mostly 2 to 4 year olds. So that's where the Sharing Show came from. We decided it would be really fun to put on a puppet theater that, like, kids might make on their own, or might go see somewhere, or at a party, a birthday party, and then intertwine that with throws to to kids doing really cool things and kind of giving them a shout out. And I think that actually was the inspiration behind we wanted to do a Christmas special, and again we had not that much money at that time.
Yes, preschool musical. That was
We
wonderful.
did preschool musical on a stick because we were, and so it was amazing. Like I would go in the studio, it'd be like everyone had like a different character, and not just the puppeteers, but everyone from every division would have. And Sandy was really amazing. That was one thing that she was good at many things as the president of Sprout, but the one thing she was really shone at was she always wanted activities that we could all do together. So we always sang happy birthday to each other when in the staff meeting if it was your birthday.
Oh,
And we all had on by our doors we had our preschool pictures as opposed to our like corporate pictures. And she would do like every year Thanksgiving event, like gingerbread houses we would make and have competitions. It was always a feeling of family and camaraderie. And I think that it showed. I hope that it showed on air that the people making the content behind the scenes really cared for each other, looked out for each other, and wanted to make the best shows and experience possible for preschoolers and their families. So it was a good time.
absolutely. And another real fun block that I remember watching was a Wiggly Waffle.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a
Yeah, yes.
story. That is a really funny story. So the Wiggles, we bought the Wiggles from, well, I mean Sprout. So they bought the Wiggles, which I thought was a really smart idea because they are so much the brand of Sprout in that these guys really care. Like it was easy in the beginning for me to make fun of the Wiggles until I had a son, and then I realized, oh my gosh,
Right.
kids really do
Right.
connect to them. And I went to one of their concerts, and I was blown away by how before and after the concert they got down to the level of a preschooler, and they all asked questions, talked to, really cared about like what a preschooler has to say. And I
Oh
was like,
yeah.
these guys are genuine, like they're the real deal. They don't do this for, I don't think they ever expected it. They were teachers. I don't think they ever expected it to become the huge success it became. But again, I am a big believer when something's authentic, it does find an audience. And so when Andrew told me that they were buying the show, and that he wanted to build a block around it, I was so excited about that. And so Meredith and I worked together, the creative director and I worked together. I'm sure there were other people in the room. But we came up with the idea because when I was a kid, I used to love Laugh-In. And it was, my parents would watch it, right? And it was like so cheesy and fun, but we liked the idea of like little doors opening because kids love that, love surprises, like an advent calendar. They love to like open up little windows, little doors. So we thought, how much fun would it be if we had like a Laugh-In type feel, and that the Wiggles would come out and you wouldn't know where they were going to come from. Because again, a preschooler is easily amazed, which is what makes them so beautiful. So they don't know, oh, well, they're just behind the scenes, like switching places. And so now they're coming out of this square instead of this square. But for kids, it's like, oh my gosh, it's such a surprise. Like who's gonna be behind that door? Which one of the Wiggles is gonna be behind that door? So then as we started brainstorming, we thought, well, how could we build a set that would look authentically like something cool that kids love, but would have little windows? And I don't know honestly who in the room came up with the idea of a waffle, but it was genius because we were like, yeah, kids love pancakes, they love waffles. And so that's really fun. And we'll have a big giant waffle, and then the Wiggles will like come in and out of, tell jokes and do fun stuff, and just be really silly. And it would be like a variety show. So that's how it started. And Meredith and I flew to Australia, and I think I want to say we spent 2.5, maybe 3 weeks there. We spent a lot of time there, and we got to go to the headquarters, the headquarters of the Wiggles, in Sydney. And what was amazing about that is that they have a warehouse where everything is there. So they have
Hmm.
their own studio, they have their own recording studios. They have, consumer products down below, and it's a real mom and pop shop. Like everybody that works there knows each other, they're family, they've grown up together. Sorry, a tree above is like dropping all kinds of stuff. So there was a real sense of family there. And what was amazing is that we'd be like, oh, we, for this episode, we really want to do blah, 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 blah. And they would be like, like tomorrow's episode, we're going to like that fast, right? Here's the script, here's what we're going to shoot. And they would be like, oh, wouldn't it be great to have an original song for that? And we're like, yeah, that would be amazing. And they'd be like, okay, we'll be right back. Let's take a break for an hour. And they go in their studio and they would write a song and it would be so good. And then we would put it in the show. Like it was, they're just phenomenal, phenomenal. And plus so kind. We got to know them really well. And their manager at the time took us out on the weekends to explore Sydney, which is a beautiful city. And we just had we just had a wonderful time. So yeah, I have all the time in the world for the Wiggles. I think that they're just an amazing talent, all of them, and their songs are just so spot on for kids, and their attitude is so authentic.
Yeah, and one of the Wiggles, Murray,
Absolutely.
is also a previous guest.
Oh, I love that. That's
Yeah.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. For
Nicely
even
done.
oh yes, yes, wonderful. He's great. I mean, all of them, all the Wiggles, they're absolutely wonderful. Um, for even I know three of us, we grew up watching Wiggles a lot on Playhouse Disney, and then on Sprout.
And then on
So
Sprout,
Yeah.
some VHS tapes as well. But
yeah,
yes.
DVDs
Yeah.
and but the Wiggles have been part of most of three of us lives, and I'm glad we're grateful that we're fans of them very much, especially
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Playhouse
no,
Disney's
it's so
Sprout.
wonderful. Yeah, you guys are exactly the audience. I mean, I don't know if my son remembers them, but boy, he really, he did go through a phase where he really they just had this ability to connect, connect.
Yeah.
That's the key. And I think they're actually coming. I read somewhere this morning that they might actually be coming with a new show. So I think they're still doing, lots of work. I don't
Yep.
know if it's all the same guys. I don't think it is.
No.
There's been,
Mm-mm.
health issues and things that happen in life, um, but they've continued the brand, which I think is wonderful because it's really, anything that gets kids singing and dancing, especially dancing, that was important to us with Wiggly Waffle. That's why we put the Wiggly in it, because we really wanted kids to get up and move and dance to
Yeah.
the music, because
Mhm.
it's such a great way of expressing yourself when you're a preschooler.
Yeah, there was a documentary, I don't know if you've seen it, that just came out recently. Speaking of the Wiggles, it really is an amazing documentary. It just came out, what, about a month ago? Something like that, as a time of recording anyway.
Almost a month ago, yeah.
Almost a
On
month ago.
the Wiggles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. I did not know that. I love watching documentaries and Fred Rogers, and there's a Canadian
Yeah.
one now, Mr. Penner. Yeah, so I would
Yeah, I've heard about that. I've heard
Yeah,
about
it's
that
on
one.
Amazon Prime. Yeah, it talks a lot about all generations of the Wiggles and
Oh, how
kind of
cool.
everyone's childhoods and how they got, brought into the group.
Oh, I love that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm gonna check that out for sure. I did not know that. Thank you for telling me.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wonderful. We've all watched it. It's really great.
Yeah.
It's
Certainly
fantastic.
a wonderful documentary. Now, speaking of Sprout, you also got to work on the show Noodle and Doodle as well.
Yes, 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 yes.
What was
Yes,
it like working on that?
that was awesome. That was really fun. Again, I think it was Andrew who he always likes to do, he was the first to kind of encourage me to do cooking for kids at Playhouse Disney. I actually flew. So after we got to work together to try and find things that we could do together for Playhouse Disney, we did a cooking show together, and we shot it in Buenos Aires, I think. And so I got to know him very well then. So when we worked together again at Sprout, he's like, I want to do a cooking show. And so I'm like, cool. And so I think he was the one that really came up with the idea of doing something. He goes, cooking would be fun, but it would be great if we had some other activity with it. Like, how can we do cooking with a craft, or how can we make it, more robust than just cooking, just something really creative. And so I can't remember. I know I was a part of it, but there was a big team of us who came up with the idea. That was the first original show that we produced before the Chica Show. And so we came up with this concept of, how cool would it be is if the kids are making something, but then use a recyclable item from whatever they're making to make a craft, so that you're kind of getting the idea of like cooking in there, but you're also getting the message of creating something, taking something that's, essentially going to be tossed in the recycling bin, but actually making something from it, which is a really big message with preschoolers. It's like, paper plates, and how can you take something that you might be throwing away after you've used it once, and maybe do something fun with it. So that was kind of the concept. So we would take like the top of a yogurt container, and use that to make something. So that's where the title Noodle and Doodle came from. It was like, oh, you not only you think of a noodle as, I mean, almost all preschoolers like chicken nuggets, noodles, and waffles.
Right. Yeah.
But how can we take something that a preschooler will connect to with food, noodle, but also have a double meaning for parents, which is like using your noodle, and then connect it to art, which was where the doodle came from. So yeah, it was a super fun show to work on. And I was only there for, I think, one season of it. I believe they did 2 seasons. And then I went over to Henson. I went from Sprout over to Henson for a year. Um for a variety of reasons, but mostly because we did a series of shorts called Pajanimals, and we wanted to make a show with Henson.
Wonderful
Um,
show.
so
Yes.
yeah,
Love that
that was
show.
amazing. I shot that in Belfast with Lisa Henson was there, who's an incredible woman. And Lisa Henson was there along with Alex Rockwell, who co-created Bear in the Big Blue House, who is still very, very prolific and does a lot of preschool shows. So I went over to Henson for a year, and then I think they did a second season, and then I came back to Sprout, and then that's when we did our second original show, like full length original show, which was the Chica Show. And it was really fun because I just spoke to a group of students from Penn University in Philadelphia, and they're your age, and a
Mhm.
bunch of them were like, you worked on the Chica Show? It was so cute because that was exactly, they were like, well, I used to watch that all the time with my mom or my dad or whoever. Um, and that show, we really wanted, everyone loved Chica, and Kelly was
Yes.
the talent, and we just really wanted to do an old fashioned show, like, kids love dress up, so we thought it would be fun to set it in a costume shop. And we just wanted to do something that was just very sweet, and not too complicated, um and if it had a real feeling of home to it, like the shop hopefully felt like you were coming to your own, and for kids to just have all these costumes and what's going to happen today based on these costumes, or who the guest is going to be. So that was a fun show to work on.
Hmm.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
speaking of pajamas, I think you might remember him, but we also previously chat with Hugh Martin.
Oh, Hugh, yes. Hugh directed I think he directed Noodle and Doodle, and he directed some of the Pajanimals as well. But he definitely directed the Chica Show. Hugh is a master. He really comes from a Henson background, so he really knows puppetry. He's a great director anyway, but I think on top of that, he's somebody that will walk in and know exactly. I was working just after COVID, through COVID, and after COVID, we shot for a nonprofit organization called Serving Kids Hope, and we wanted to do a puppet series, and there was a lot that I still had to learn about, you know, building a set to accommodate, because I used to have, a team of people that knew how to do that, and so this is nonprofit, so we had really no money. And so Hugh very kindly looked at the set designs and gave us suggestions of of what to do so that the puppeteer isn't uncomfortable. And that's the
Mhm.
key thing when you're working with puppeteers, because they're so good at what they do. But if you don't make it comfortable for them, like I still to this day wish that we could have made it more comfortable for Stacia. If you don't make it comfortable for them, they're not going to have fun. And if they don't have fun, it's going to show, the
Yeah.
characters like not have the energy. Um, like for instance, with Pajanimals, the whole entire bedroom set was, up on stilts so they could
Mhm.
stand and not have to crouch down or not have to get into any kind of a weird twisted position. They could just literally stand. I mean, there's still huge challenge to some of the things they had to do, but they could lift their arm up. They didn't have to crouch down and lift their arm up. And I think that's the thing that Hugh is really good at. Like he'll just go, he has such respect for puppeteers and for talent that he wants to make them as comfortable as possible. Plus he's like the speediest guy. He's so fast. He just gets it and moves on. And he's a great communicator. He's right to the point. Like he'll be like, nope, let's do it this way. Okay, we got it. Move on. Like I love that about him. There's never any hesitation. He's excellent director.
Love Hugh so much. He's
Yes.
just so wonderful.
Do you want to see
Jim.
my do you want to see my impersonation of Hugh?
Oh my
Sure.
Oh,
god.
Yeah,
yes.
sure. Why
Love to
not?
see that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
Yes.
Hi. That's what he does. Hi. How are you? He just gets right in your face. He's like an extreme close up all the time. He's just like right
Yeah.
in your face, and he's like, "Hi." Like, yeah, he
That's
just
kind of what he was like when he joined the Zoom meeting for our interview with him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
he's like
Mhm.
that all the time. He is such an energetic guy.
He is so wonderful.
He came to my house once for dinner, and my son was probably about 5 or 6 at the time. He's now 25. But he was about 5 or 6
Wow.
at the time. And we had a really nice dinner. And then Hugh left, and my son turned to me and said, "Does that man drink a lot of coffee?"
That's funny.
I think that's just who he is naturally. Uh-huh. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
He's
It's
great.
Yeah.
it's interesting how a 5 or 6-year-old knows about coffee in the first place. Let's
Oh, well, I
start
think his
there.
mom and dad probably like drinking a lot of it and saying something
Yeah.
about
Yeah,
enough
You
right.
know
energy.
what? Yes.
Does he drink enough
Probably.
coffee? I just
Yes.
cracked up laughing. I think I told you that. And he just laughed, and that great laugh that he has. He's just like, I've never met anyone more alive. He's just so alive, like to the moment. He's like, what's next? He
Hmm.
loves adventures and
Mhm.
he loves creativity, and he's very good at he's just an extremely good director.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Wonderful.
Mhm.
Yeah. We'll tell him that you said hi too.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh, please do. Yeah,
Yes.
he is one of my that's the sad thing about when you move on from different places, you make so many friends while you're working with them, and then unfortunately, distance, whatever, you don't see them as often, and then you kind of lose. Meredith and I keep saying we got to get together. We haven't been together for so long. Like I've got to come to New York. You've got to come to LA. We have to spend some time together. But days go by, years go by, and you're like, oh, we still haven't seen each other. But Hugh is somebody that I always have time for. And if I could ever hire again as a director, I would in an instant. And again, that's thanks to Henson. I mean, these are the people that I met when I worked at Henson. These amazing. I mean, Henson uses all the best writers, directors, producers, and he was one of them.
Absolutely.
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 Wonderful person. And but yeah,
Mhm.
Pajamas, amazing.
Oh
Wonderful
yes,
show.
love Pajanimals.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a really sweet show. And one of the puppeteers, all the puppeteers were incredible, but one of the puppeteers, we could only bring 2 puppeteers over from Henson to Belfast. So we used local talent for the others, I believe. Trying to remember where we found the other puppeteer. Anyway, one of the puppeteers is a very good friend of mine. Still a very, very good friend of mine. I just saw him actually a couple weeks ago, where we always try and go out for lunch every couple weeks, is Victor Vered, who is an
Ah, yes.
Yeah, he's done a
Love
lot of wonderful
Victor.
things. Yeah.
Mhm.
excellent puppeteer. He played Squacky.
Yes, he
And
Yes,
did.
love
Yes.
Squacky.
Such amazing
Squacky.
job for that character.
Oh,
Yep.
Yes.
he's just so full of heart, and he's just so good. Like he can just take anything and make it come to life. Like, he's just an excellent puppeteer. And a really fun improver too. Like, he's done some of the Puppet Up shows. He's very, very funny, fun improver. And he Squacky had that little lisp, he's just like such a sweet character.
Right?
Yeah, yeah, he's the best. So yeah, Victor is another one that I'm just so honored to have worked with, and hope that I get a chance to work with him again. Actually, the nonprofit I was telling you guys about, Victor volunteered. This is the kind of guy he is. He volunteered his time, not only volunteered his time to shoot, he brought all of his equipments and found two other puppeteers that were willing to pretty well donate their time for this nonprofit. And the three of them were amazing because the characters were birds. And again, this was a perfect example of what he wouldn't want to do. Is we tried, we actually made some changes based on Hugh's feedback, but we got the lumber for the set donated from Home Depot, and a local carpenter to come and build the set. Like, everything was donations, so we weren't able to have like the skill set of someone who's experienced doing it. So the puppeteers were not in the most comfortable position to do the two pieces that we did, but they came and they just totally rocked it. And it's called Cucamuckaluca, and we've shot 2 episodes that are frequently in schools, and that we're hoping to do all the whole alphabet. We did A and B, but we're now trying to raise money to do the rest. But anyway, bottom line being, Victor came, he volunteered his time, and he just knocked it out of the park.
Definitely.
Terrific, absolutely terrific. And Pajamas is absolutely wonderful. Another show you got to work on, speaking of Henson, was Sid the Science Kid. Another
Yes.
phenomenal show.
Yes, I got to put on my promo hat for that one because when I was brought into Henson, I was brought in to support Hallie Stanford, who is still there and making great shows. And so it was a combination of like anything that she needed help with, as well as bringing in ideas for new shows. I brought in an idea called the Possibility Shop that was it was a digital series. It wasn't on any kind of platform, with a wonderful woman named Courtney Watkins. But one of the things that they needed help with is that they PBS wanted promos for Sid the Science Kid, and they were shooting it in the studio, and nobody there had experience writing promos. And so I was like, I can do that. So it's funny how you put on old hats and it just comes back naturally. So I did that, and that was another series that's really how I got to know Hugh, actually, because he was directing that series, and Victor, because Victor was obviously one of the, was the character. So yeah, and that is with that incredible Henson puppetry system that is like it's like animation in real time puppet system, which is amazing. Like, you would see on the screen, you would look over here and see the puppets puppeteering, the mouths and and then you'd look over here and you'd see it fully animated like, it's hard to get your head around, but it's a pretty incredible system. And Jim Henson actually came up with the system. I think Brian might have helped him, but Jim Henson came up with the system because he wanted to find a way where puppeteers didn't have to like kind of climb all over each other if they were doing a group scene. Like, isn't there a way to do it digitally? Isn't there a way to kind of come together with this? So I think Henson's done a couple of series using that technology. And in fact, they're pitching one right now, which is a dance show created and written by Alex Rockwell. So yeah, so they're hoping to, and I think that's genius because the system really lends itself to physical movement.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So currently you have your own company, How You Doing Productions. Can you kind of talk about how that was created and the kind of work that it does?
Yeah, for sure. So it came from, a lot of people think it came from Friends. I was one of a zillion people that didn't watch all of the Friends episodes. So I didn't know that was a thing from Friends. But my husband, since I've met him, he has a habit when he meets people or sees people of saying, how you doing? And I just think it's such a nice way to, greet somebody, because it's really it's also a bit of a British thing. We have a British friend who, whenever he sees me, he's like, he says that, like, how you doing? How you getting on? Like that sort of. So there's just something, I think, really sweet about it. So when we were creating a production company, I just thought it was kind of funny because it's, DOIN apostrophe as opposed to like doing. But that production company is there so that when I freelance, which I've done quite a bit in between corporate jobs, so I'm a creative consultant, and what that means really is I do everything from writing, researching, all kids, writing, researching, helping out, shooting, being a field producer, to coming up with concepts. So a lot of times, especially in Europe, a lot of times people will have a seed of an idea and they don't know how to make it into a fully fledged preschool show. And so preschool in particular, I do some older kids with Future Chicken. It's for 7 to 9-year-olds. It's older kids, but for for coming up with concepts, it's usually preschool that I get calls for. So it's like, we've got this character, we've got this musician, we've got this small concept, and then they hire me to work with the creator to really pull out what the essence of the show is about, what the theme is, what the tone is, who the characters are, what the structure will be, what some of the stories will be, some of the log lines. And so I help to do that. And then in the end, they walk away with a, show Bible that they can then use to pitch the series. So that seems to be the thing I do the most. I've done it
Nice.
for independent production companies, but I've also done it for like HarperCollins and that's what I primarily did at Cartoon Network, at Warner Brothers, is to really help build the slate of preschool programming with creators. So so that's what I do, and I'm loving it. I mean, I do miss some things about being a part of a corporation, and maybe one day I'll go back. But there is something really nice too with working with different companies and wearing different hats in a day, and being able to play with different brands and help people to help people with their ideas and how to solidify it into a full concept.
Absolutely. So, as we're getting close to wrapping up here, people would like to connect with you. Where can people find you?
So I think email is the best for me because I'm online all the time. So I'm at Lisa at lobrien.com, OBRIEN.com. I'm also on LinkedIn, and it's just under Lisa O'Brien. I'm in the process of putting together a website. Actually, that's what my next call is about, funnily enough, is to get advice on putting a little website together.
Oh, cool.
But I think those
Nice.
are probably the best ways, email or LinkedIn, and
Yes.
I'm also on Facebook. I think I'm one of the few people that are still hanging on to Facebook, but I'm
Yeah,
still on
right.
Facebook.
Yes.
It's gonna be so antiquated in like the next, I don't know. But yeah. So yeah, I'm always up for any kind of connection and a hello to whoever wants to reach out.
Of course. And
Awesome. All your links will be down in the description below.
Yeah.
yes. And so the last question that Jake is about to ask is a question we ask all of our guests at the end. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Chris. So, of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Thank you, post production. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
Wow, that's a great question. Um, I think for me, when I think nostalgia, I think of when I was probably your age, and there used to be like, from a content standpoint, there used to be like special nights of shows on television that doesn't exist anymore, and it would make me so excited. Like there'd be a Thursday night lineup that would have like Moonlighting and Family Ties and these shows, and I'm really nostalgic. And the definition to me is like something that you experienced when you were younger that brings you back great memories, and you want to kind of recapture that. So I'm a bit nostalgic for that. But I do want to add that when we were launching Sprout, we said that very thing. And that's what I'm so honored and happy that you guys reached out to me and all the other Sprout people that you've reached out to, because we wanted to create that for that generation of kid, for young kids. We wanted a place that felt really homey, and that like felt like that it was something that they would look back on with fond memories, and when they get older. And in fact, when we were putting the brand book together, we were trying to describe like what's the essence of that, because doing brand work is really interesting, because you're like, what color would it be, what's the look, we were lucky to start with a great name, Sprout. But I remember saying, to me, nostalgia when it comes to Sprout is that you can go and get digital pictures done, and they're beautiful and they're fast. You can touch them
Right.
up, you can do whatever. But to me, Sprout was like a old fashioned black and white photo booth where, you jam in, they still have them around, you jam in and you've got like 4 pictures that come out, and, you know, one of them might be good. The rest of them is like your head's cut off, or things, you're in mid laugh, or it's like the goofiest picture, but you put it on your fridge and you remember it, and it brings back such memories of that occasion or that moment. And that's what we wanted Sprout to be. We were always like, it's an old-fashioned photo booth. It's not your slick, like touched up, retouched digital, glossy picture. It's a photo booth. So that's what I think of as well when I think of nostalgia.
Great words to end on.
Well, so good to see you guys, and
Yes.
Yes.
thank you for inviting me on the show.
Wonderful,
Yes.
and and thank you very
Wonderful.
much, for being on, especially for what you've done over the years, what you've done to be a part of our lives. Keep up the great work of what you're doing now, and cannot wait what's next in store for you. And thank you very much for coming here. It means a lot to the 3 of us.
Yes.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure.
Yes.
Okay, guys,
Yeah, of
Yes,
course.
keep
care.
in
Have
touch.
a
I'll let
great
you know
day.
when this goes up.
Yes.
Yeah, please do. I would love that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
All right.
Wonderful.
Bye,
Okay,
Lisa.
bye,
Enjoy the
guys.
rest of your day.
Bye.
It's okay, Lisa. See ya. And it's goodbye from us as well.
Mhm.
Yes, folks, we absolutely enjoyed our time with Lisa O'Brien. Keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. See ya. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.